Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the expert roundtable on the role of EU research and innovation for boosting energy security and competitiveness. Today is an interactive session, so I would like to encourage all of you to engage with this session using Slido. The hashtag is Clean Energy Security. My first key message today is that Europe's commitment to the European Green Deal and becoming the first climate-neutral continent in the world by 2050 remains unchanged. It is important to note that a successful climate transition can go hand in hand with a strengthened industrial competitiveness, especially in the clean tech sectors. This is at the heart of Europe's strategy for sustainable prosperity and competitiveness. And the next Commission will present a new clean industrial deal for competitive industries and quality jobs. It will focus on supporting and creating the right conditions for companies to achieve our common objectives and to ensure access to affordable, sustainable and secure energy and raw materials. To enable this transition, we must achieve the objectives of the Net Zero Industry Act, through which we want to ramp up Europe's manufacturing capacities, skills and investments in clean energy technologies, such as solar panels, wind generators, hydrogen and renewable fuels technologies, just to name a few. So for the future, we will continue to focus on sustainable competitiveness. My second key message today is that we need to put research and innovation at the heart of our European economy. The transition requires significant and sustained investments in clean energy infrastructure and technologies. In line with the Commission's new political priorities, Mr. Letta's report on the single market and Mr. Draghi's report on the future of the European competitiveness, research and innovation remain the key drivers of productivity growth and future European competitiveness, which at the same time is also sustainable and inclusive. For the clean tech sector, the Draghi report highlights that beyond investments, research and innovation are crucial to enable the green transition and to boost Europe's long-term competitiveness. In total, Horizon Europe's Cluster 5 on climate, energy and mobility will invest around 7 billion euros across the entire value chain of clean energy technologies. Almost half of this amount is co-invested with industry and member states through our Horizon Europe partnerships, which implement a commonly agreed strategic research and innovation agenda, such as for hydrogen, batteries, and a soon-to-be-established partnership on solar energy. Such partnerships remain important instruments for the future. Another important instrument is the Strategic Energy Technology Plan, also known as the SET Plan. The SET Plan supports the development of clean, efficient and cost-competitive energy technologies through coordination and collaboration in clean energy research and innovation. It contributes to the fifth pillar of our energy union on research, innovation and competitiveness, and it also contributes to our European research area. The SET Plan brings together member states, industry and academia around commonly defined strategic research and innovation agendas on renewable energy technologies identified as critical for Europe in our Net Zero Industry Act. The SET Plan was revised in October last year to harmonise its original strategic objectives with those of the European Green Deal, Repower EU and the Green Deal Industrial Plan. For example, the SET Plan will support efforts to double the current share of renewable energy in the European Union to reach at least 42.5% by 2030, with innovative renewable technologies representing at least 5% of newly installed renewable energy capacity. The SET Plan will also develop flexible and innovative solutions to optimize the existing energy grid, with the aim to integrate at least 65% of renewable energy into our grids by 2030. It will also strengthen the battery value chain by boosting domestic sourcing, reusability and recyclability to achieve a self-sufficiency in the European battery manufacturing by 2030. Through the SET Plan, we also monitor how we are doing with strengthening the competitiveness of the European Union's clean energy and net zero technology sectors through a yearly progress report, which is based on data provided by the Horizon Europe Clean Energy Technology Observatory, which is implemented by the European Commission's Joint Research Centre. My third key message today is that international collaboration is key to accelerate the clean energy transition globally. This is why the European Commission is an active partner of Mission Innovation, a global forum that enables us to collectively advance work on important objectives with countries and partners around the world, like on clean hydrogen, urban transitions, and net zero industries. At the recent Mission Innovation ministerial meeting, we announced a memorandum of understanding to be concluded between Mission Innovation and the Horizon Europe partnerships on clean energy transition and the Driving Urban Transition partnerships. This opens up our European partnerships to participation from Mission Innovation countries across the globe, and this way we leverage even more public investments in clean energy technologies. To conclude, competitiveness, sustainability, and energy security are three sides of the same coin that require a long-term vision. In the coming decade, energy security will be increasingly determined by access to clean energy technologies, materials, and components. And this is why DG Research and Innovation commissioned this independent expert study on clean energy research and innovation opportunities to make sure that European energy security, by targeting challenges of distinct energy value chains by 2030 and beyond, will define specific research and innovation challenges for energy security in the long term. It will also develop specific research and innovation action plan, which will address the highest priority energy security criticalities of the clean energy value chain. It will provide valuable input for research and innovation policy priorities by addressing both the energy security and our competitiveness. So today we have a very interesting panel lined up for you, with whom we will be diving deeper into the lessons that we learn from this study and also the next steps that we will be taking based on this study. But first, I'm very pleased to give the floor to Mr. Thomas Slecker to present the key findings of this study.
I would like to thank my director, Rosalinde van der Vlies, for sharing with us her insights on the EU clean energy R&I policy landscape and the reasoning behind the study on energy security, to which we come now. The study on clean energy R&I opportunities to ensure European energy security by targeting challenges of distinct energy value chains for 2030 and beyond was conducted by an independent expert team from RAND Europe, CE Delft and E3 Modeling. Next slide, please. We have here today the project leader of the study, Susan Guthrie, Research Group Director at RAND Europe, and Martin de Vries, Senior Researcher at CE Delft, presenting you the outcomes of the study with a focus on R&I opportunities to strengthen EU clean energy security now and looking to 2050. Next slide, please. Before we come to the results, I would like to briefly introduce in more detail the study objectives and scope. The objectives are to assess the energy security components of European clean energy technology value chains, to identify R&I opportunities and challenges for value chains to maintain, boost or mitigate risks to European energy security, and to set out an action plan to enhance energy security of whole value chains over the next 10 years. Importantly, energy security in the remits of this study is defined as the uninterrupted availability of energy sources at an affordable price, according to IEA definition, and this comprises the clean energy technologies themselves as well as the overall value chain. In scope of the study are 17 clean energy technology or technology groups, which are displayed here and to which we will come back in the following slides. Next slide, please. Now on the study conceptualization, the study was delivered as 4 tasks, as specified in the terms of reference. In task 1, this consists of an in-depth analysis of the energy security of clean energy technology value chains, so establishing of the overall methodology and the scenarios. Task 2 is about the assessment of energy security of technology value chains, while here there's an in-depth analysis of the energy security of those value chains and reflection with the scenarios to assess energy security and criticalities by 2030 and 2050. Task 3 identified research and innovation interventions and provides a strategic analysis, including a SWOT analysis, to develop an action plan for actions within the next 10 years. And task 4, with a validation workshop, is an important element to review and refine the study findings. As you see displayed here on the slide, the interaction between central elements of the overall workflow in between the tasks, it's important. The element of key drivers, which then feed in and lead to the assessment of the value chain, followed by a strategic analysis with the SWOT analysis as the main element, and then the establishment and ranking of research and innovation opportunities, and to see also the feedback loops and the information flow displayed. And with this, I would like to hand over to Martin for the results of the studies. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I will now briefly describe the steps we've taken for the energy security assessment of the clean energy technologies. In the first step, we identified representative value chains for each of the 17 clean energy technologies that were within scope of the study and that were just shown on one of the previous slides by Thomas. We identified 1 to 4 distinct value chains per technology, arriving at 48 value chains in total for assessment. In the second step, we identified a comprehensive set of 10 energy security indicators for our assessment. In this study, we applied a broad understanding of the concept of energy security, and these indicators all reflect distinct aspects of energy security. I will present the 10 indicators in a minute. In the third step, the actual assessment was performed. We assessed all 10 energy security indicators for all 48 value chains, assigning them a score from 1 to 3 for their energy security risk. And before doing so, we had to develop a harmonized approach in order to apply each indicator consistently across all value chains. In step 4, from this assessment, we compiled a long list of key energy security criticalities at value chain level. While in the third step, we considered the energy security risk as a, so to say, intrinsic risk of the technologies, here we added the time element to it by making use of 3 different future scenarios. And this way, we arrived at a long list of criticalities for both 2030 and 2050. And in the final step, we narrowed down this long list to a short list of key energy security criticalities. This was done at technology level again, so those 17 clean energy technologies, so in an aggregated way. And the shortlisting was performed based on a multi-criteria analysis. And it was validated by the participants to our validation workshop. Next slide, please. This slide shows all 48 value chains within scope, and it's just for illustration and later reference. In bold are the 17 clean energy technologies, and below are all distinct value chains we have assessed. Next slide, please. This slide shows the 10 energy security indicators that I talked about before, and I will treat them here very briefly. In the first place, we looked at critical raw materials, or CRMs, as I will refer to them from now on, needed for the different technologies. And we looked to them both from a perspective of geopolitical availability and from the perspective of scarcity. We also looked at circularity, so that means the reuse and recyclability of the materials needed for technology. The indicators on supply chain are actually very relevant for the current debate on EU competitiveness. We distinguish the complexity of the supply chain, and with which we meant actually how many different steps were involved in a supply chain, and the supply chain location, which basically came to the question whether these steps were located inside or outside the European Union. We also considered digital and physical vulnerabilities for the technologies, broader sustainability, the eighth indicator, that refers to risks associated with the Sustainable Development Goals. So all the technologies are they are renewable or clean, but there can still be all kind of other risks related to sustainability, for instance, on biodiversity impacts or on land and water use. Affordability, that refers to the costs of a technology relative to comparable technologies. And finally, skills could include all types of skills needed for a technology, for instance, installation skills, but also skills related to research. Next slide, please. In the next 2 slides, I will present some cross-cutting results from our assessment. Unfortunately, there's no time now to go into the specific value chains, but these results, therefore, are overarching results from our energy security assessment. We found that critical raw materials, digital vulnerability, and skills overall came out as key risks for energy security. In some cases, digital vulnerability and skills were added by the validation workshop participants. To be sure, we also identified other risks, for instance, associated with the supply chain location, supply chain complexity, or with broader sustainability. But often these risks were actually also related to the CRMs. For instance, when a vulnerable part of the supply chain actually turned out to be associated with the supply of certain CRMs, or sustainability risks actually turned out to be associated with the risk of mining certain CRMs. So in that sense, those risks were not fully independent from the ones directly related to the availability of CRMs. Also, for many technologies, the CRMs listed are quite generic ones, like copper and aluminium. Therefore, the related supply risks cannot be attributed to specific value chains, but rather form a systemic vulnerability for the energy system. But of course, there are also some value chains that definitely do require some specific CRMs, and also CRMs that can have a serious supply risk, such as solar PV, electrolyzers, and batteries. Next slide, please. Some other overarching results include that in addition to advanced electronics for smart technologies, the validation workshop participants pointed at the importance of more standard low technology electronics as well. Digital vulnerabilities were initially also mainly identified for smart technologies or technologies where cyber attacks may cause significant physical damage, but workshop participants added to this the risk specifically arising from increasing interconnectivity across devices, where those devices are actually associated with different value chains, therefore creating a systemic vulnerability again. For skills, it was noted that there is a general shortage of installation skills, and this was actually somewhat independent from the actual value chain. So those are installation skills that could be for heat pumps, for instance, or wind or solar PV. And actually, this has partly to do with competition among several clean energy technologies that are all growing quite fast nowadays. For sure, especially during the workshop, skills was an important theme, but it should be noted that it is hard to say how skills availability will actually develop on the longer term. And this was actually also true for other indicators, as of course, risks for 2050 are naturally much harder to assess than for 2030, if only because measures taken to address the 2030 risks will always already impact 2050 risks as well, the risk level for 2050 as well. And this was, for instance, also the case for affordability, as it proved quite hard to predict how costs will actually develop in the long term. So this was a general limitation of our assessment, mainly related to the assessment for 2050. I will now hand over to Susan for the presentation of the R&I action plan and R&I interventions. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Martin. Great. So the next step, building on this energy security assessment across the value chains, was to develop an R&I action plan. I'm going to describe in brief how we went about doing this and then present the action plan, including a deep dive into a few of the actions that we developed. In terms of the process, we took the criticalities identified from our analysis of value chains and converted these into a set of possible R&I challenges. We then used a SWOT analysis, so looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, to consider Europe's readiness to address the challenges and develop and prioritise some actions. These were tested and triangulated against the scenarios we developed, looking for actions that could be relevant to get across several different possible futures. We also looked to see where there were opportunities to address more than one criticality with a single R&I intervention. The shortlisting process, as well as the actions and criticalities developed, were also tested and validated through our expert workshop. Based on this analysis, we were able to develop a comprehensive set of 30 R&I actions which form a plan to help the EU mitigate risks, capitalise on European strengths, and help ensure energy security to 2050 as we transition to clean energy technologies. On the next slide, you can see that as well as developing these 30 interactions, we also classified them into 4 priority groups based on the SWOT analysis. This slide shows the 9 actions that we identified as being the highest priority for the EU. We have grouped them here by the type of criticality they aim to address. We see that 3 of these address issues related to supply chain location and complexity, 4 relate to critical raw material abundance and availability, 1 is linked to sustainability, and 1 to digital vulnerability. What this demonstrates is that although each clean energy value chain operates differently and faces its own unique challenges, there are common risks and challenges emerging across many of these value chains, and some of these reflect some of the areas presented previously by Martin, so critical raw materials being one of those. I don't have time to present all 9 of these in detail, let alone all 30 recommended actions we have in the action plan, but I will share a deep dive here into a few examples, and we can also discuss some of the others as part of the panel session later. So on the next slide, you can see an example action. Each action is defined by an expected outcome, so what we want to achieve, the scope, what is included and covered, and we also set out, of course, the relevant criticality and value chain. Where possible, we provide additional information on things like the TRL, perhaps collaboration opportunities and other things that are maybe relevant to the implementation of the action. An example action is presented here, and in this case, the proposed R&I intervention is to improve the energy efficiency of battery manufacturing and recycling. This follows on from a criticality we identified related to lithium-based batteries, which is that the supply chain is located outside of the EU. Battery manufacturing is an energy-intensive, contributing to higher costs of manufacturing in the EU compared with other countries due to comparatively higher costs of energy. R&I focused on improving the energy efficiency of manufacturing and recycling processes will provide a mechanism to increase the competitiveness of an EU-based supply chain, address currently missing capabilities such as raw materials processing, and develop skills and know-how. In terms of scope, we specify that they should focus on the construction phase of mature battery technologies, such as lithium-based batteries, which require advanced machinery, skilled labour, and, in general, high energy use. Increased efforts in recycling of lithium-ion and other types of batteries would also make Europe less dependent on external countries as to the major producers of most of the critical raw materials needed. Reducing the price of lithium-ion batteries would also improve European competitiveness. This intervention was well supported by workshop participants and is thought to have a high potential for impact. On the next slide, we present another example. This is Action 23, which aims to address the supply chain vulnerabilities related to silicon-based PV modules and their critical raw materials through a collaborative industry programme to increase the efficiency of PV manufacturing in the EU. There is not sufficient manufacturing capacity of solar cells in the EU, and current mining and manufacturing is largely based outside of the EU and mainly in one country, namely China. This appears to be the weakest link of the solar PV value chain. Entering the market with EU cells and modules is difficult because production costs are lower in Asia. In addition, valuable high-purity silicon is currently not yet being recovered for high-grade reuse in solar cells. Since producing silicon requires a lot of energy, there's room for improvement, therefore, from a scalability perspective. Therefore, we suggested a Horizon Europe Collaborative Industry Programme, which could support new supply chains focused on increasing the efficiency of solar PV manufacturing processes in the EU. This would support the development of solutions enabling onshoring and cost competitiveness of EU-based PV supply chains. To complement this, activities regarding energy-efficient recycling of silicon from waste streams would also feed into energy efficiency and circularity objectives. It's worth noting here we've also proposed another action to develop an EU-based perovskite value chain, which provides an alternative solution. However, we felt there would be value in pursuing both of those actions to de-risk the future of PV, which is an important part of the clean energy transition. Finally, on the next slide, just as a final example, I'd like to say a little about Action 30, which focuses on critical raw materials. These are highlighted as a key criticality within many of the technology value chains, as you can see in the table on the right here. It's clear that mining of these materials will need to increase to meet demand for the clean energy transition, both in the EU and beyond. However, this may meet with significant public opposition due to the environmental and other implications for citizens. Therefore, alongside technology-specific solutions targeting the substitution or reduction of CRMs, we suggest Action 30 here, conducting public engagement and research on mining to understand public concerns and mechanisms to address these. This is a technology-agnostic action which could apply to mining of any CRM, but we suggest it may be most pertinent in relation to some specific PV and battery technologies, and also the semiconductors and microchips in smart technologies, where public opposition is a risk within and outside the EU because of some of the mining practices and environmental impacts involved. Understanding and finding mechanisms to address these concerns, such as sustainable mining practices with minimal environmental impact or improved working conditions and operations, will be important to enable domestic production to be increased, de-risking a range of clean energy technologies. The work would inform both technical approaches and policy regulation in this area. This is a shared international challenge requiring cooperation, and in this case we specifically highlight existing partnerships with African countries given the source of some of the materials that we would need. On the next slide you can see a summary of the remaining 21 R&I actions. Hopefully that's given you a flavour of some of the R&I actions we've developed. Oh, have we missed a slide? Sorry about that. Well, we've developed further 21 R&I actions across priority groups 2 to 4, spanning a wide range of connect technologies and covering many of the different themes or criticalities we've already discussed. For more detail on those actions, please do refer to the study report, which is at the link you can see hopefully on the next slide. We could move forward on slide. Thank you. Okay, thank you for listening. I look forward to a good discussion on the topic.
Thank you, Susan and Martin. With this, we complete the presentation of the study, and thank you for your interest. I would like now to hand over the floor to Davide Amato, Deputy Head of Unit Clean Energy Transitions in DG Research and Innovation, for the panel discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas, and welcome everybody on stage for a panel discussion on the role of research and innovation for boosting energy security and competitiveness in Europe's clean energy transition. With me on stage today, virtually, Susan Guthrie, that you just heard speaking, Research Group Director at Round Europe, Adel El Gamal, with me, Secretary General of the European Energy Research Alliance, Vincent Berrutto, Head of Unit Digitalization, Competitiveness, Research Innovation at DG NR, European Commission, Evangelis Tsimas, Head of Unit Energy Transition Insights for Policy at the JRC, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. Later on today, we will have a moment dedicated to answer some of your questions from home. So please feel free to continue using Slido and submit your question at any time under the hashtag Clean Energy Security. But let's get started now with the first part of our discussion today. As a very first thematic area, I'd like to look with you into how research innovation can improve competitiveness of the clean energy sector and Europe's energy security in the long term. So I would rather start with Susan and ask you that, based on your work, could you highlight specific pathways that address competitiveness at the same time as energy security?
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, so as you saw from the presentation, in our study, we were really focusing on R&I interventions to improve energy security. However, a key aspect of that was thinking about the extent to which the value chains are based within or outside the EU. Of course, this has significant implications for energy security, given a changing and uncertain geopolitical landscape. So many of the actions we've developed address energy security through improving EU competitiveness in the relevant technology areas, and hence enabling more onshoring of technologies into the EU. So some of the suggested actions build on areas where we already have strengths that could be further capitalised upon. So, you could take the example of advanced biofuels. There we proposed a collaborative industry R&I to improve availability of feedstock. So this is an area where the EU is really strong at the R&I level, but we need further private investment. So the idea would be having an action to create incentives for private investment, enable EU-based industry to develop and deploy novel technologies, and then sort of contribute to global competitiveness in that area. Some of the others focus on improving EU competitiveness by addressing some of the challenges in differential costs between the EU and other countries. So I presented an example on batteries there in the presentation, where improving the energy efficiency of the manufacturing and recycling would enable more onshoring there and make the EU more competitive and in parallel increase energy security as well. And then, of course, we talked as well about critical raw materials. And we already see here high levels of demand for many of the raw materials, both for the green transition itself, but also often some of those materials are also being used as part of the digital transition. So it's likely competition for those limited resources are going to continue to grow, meaning access to those kinds of materials are going to be a key determinant of competitiveness for the EU. So a large number of our suggested actions are targeted to improve access to critical raw materials through improved recycling and reuse, for example, or to reduce dependence on these through finding alternative routes for different technology value chains. So overall, I would say there's a pretty good alignment between competitiveness and energy security, and many of the actions proposed actually cover both of these.
Thank you very much, Susan. I'd like to turn to Adele now, and like to ask you how you see these from the perspective of leading European research in the energy area. I mean, do you see any additional element that you'd like to bring to our consideration?
Yeah, thank you, Davide. First, I would like maybe to bring a more global perspective, and as was alluded to by Mr. van der Vlies in the introduction, what we must understand is that while we are moving away, unfortunately not rapidly enough, but away from the fossil fuel economy, the energy, we're moving to a renewable or low carbon energy regime. This will have major significance in terms of what security of supply means. It means that instead of having to secure the supply of fossil fuels, we'll have to secure the supply of the low carbon technologies that we need to harvest the renewable energies. And this is about having mastering basically the manufacturing, or having leadership in the manufacturing of these technologies. And as this is absolutely immense in terms of economic signification, it means that there is a global and fierce competition on getting leadership on these technologies. So this is absolutely essential. Having or building the leadership in these technologies are absolutely an essential element to restoring the economic competitiveness and the energy security of Europe as a whole. Now, if we look at Europe, unfortunately, we have a number. We are still strong, also we are losing ground, but still strong in a number of these low carbon technologies. But we need to understand that we have a number of structural disadvantages. I will mention a few. The first one, we mentioned it already, it's the high cost of primary energy, and the differential will always be there because United States has energy and China is buying it very cheap from Russia. So this will remain one. We have higher labor costs, and this is because of a welfare state, and this is part of the European values. We don't want to change that. We have almost zero access to critical raw materials, and we know that developing it in Europe will be long and difficult for many reasons, which were particularly well addressed in the document. And last but not least, we do not enjoy the scale of the market in the same way as do the United States or China. We're still highly fragmented in many respects. And in looking at those disadvantages, one lever, and the key leverage on which we can act, is really research innovation, because by research innovation we can build technological leadership and thereby restore or consolidate our industrial leadership in these technologies. This is absolutely essential, and I will just mention two elements. The first one is that we ought to be at 3% GDP in terms of research innovation spending. At the moment, we're at 2.2. We're lagging behind all our global competitors, particularly, well, China, but particularly United States, South Korea, and Japan. So this is one element. And when we look at what we need to invest in research innovation, we need to remember always that this is not a cost, this is an investment. And I will just finish by mentioning the ex-ante impact assessment of Horizon Europe, which shows that every euro which is invested in Horizon Europe delivers a value which is up to 11 euros to the society, European society, in a time frame of 25 years. So research innovation is a key lever to restore and consolidate the European competitiveness.
Thank you very much, Adele, and also very much in line with what Mr. Draghi put forward in his report. You mentioned net zero technologies, and this maybe leads me to Vincent, because Vincent and his team were one of the drafters of the proposal of the Net Zero Industry Act together with the colleagues in DG GROW. I would like to ask you, how do you see how the Net Zero Industry Act could foster research innovation to improve European competitiveness?
Thank you, David. And thank you also to Martin and Susan for this very interesting presentation, which will help us prepare the future work programs on Horizon Europe. I would like to perhaps start where Adele stopped, and the role of research and innovation to boost the competitiveness of the industry in Europe. I think I cannot but agree with this. And this is why when we prepared the Net Zero Industry Act, or the NZIA, we looked at ways how this regulation could foster research and innovation in a way that will ultimately boost the competitiveness of the industry in the sector of net zero technologies. And we've done that through different means. I mean, the first one is that we added some provisions to facilitate the establishment of regulatory sandboxes. So when an organization wants to test an innovative technology in a real world for a limited time, then the member states will establish these regulatory sandboxes. So that will facilitate the testing, the demonstration of innovative technologies in a real world. I mean, that will be a big difference. And then secondly, we've looked at the hydrogen valleys. We've looked at the projects that are being supported through the internet in projects of common European interest, and the projects that are now being supported through the Hydrogen Bank. And we included in the NZIA some provisions so that these projects can benefit from very short permit granting time. So in other words, if manufacturers want to set up a new factory, then the member states and the authorities will organize it in such a way that the permit will be given in record time, in much shorter time than it is the case now. So that's a second area of intervention. The third one is very important because it's about creating demand for innovative products. And there we have some provisions on access to market, whereby we ask member states when they design auctions to take into account non-price criteria. And among these non-price criteria, there can be an innovation criterion. So in other words, they can foster the market uptake of innovative technologies through their auctions. And that can be the case, for instance, for wind technologies, when they have auctions for large-scale offshore wind park, for instance. Then we also included some provisions so that we have incentivizing member states to use pre-commercial procurement and also the procurement of innovation, public procurement of innovation. I mean, that these are tools that have been tested already, that have shown that they can also stimulate innovation. They're not really used in a wide way, but the NZIA give a further incentive for member states to do that. And lastly, we thought that it's very important that member states' authorities exchange on how they foster innovation within their country, and then seeing how the best practices can be replicated elsewhere. So we set up this Net Zero Europe platform where member states will discuss implementation issues that are linked to NZIA. And among these, there will be discussions on the innovation and how member states can foster innovation in the field of net zero technologies, with the ultimate goal always to accelerate the penetration of innovative technologies, but also to boost the competitiveness of those industries that manufacture these net zero technologies.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Vangelis, now turning to you, and from the joint research science to policy angle, what is your vision on these matters?
Let me start with a statement that also was made by Rosalinde. We have to be carbon neutral by 2050. And the International Energy Agency reminded us that 35% of the emissions that we have to reduce will come from technologies that are not commercialized yet. So therefore, the role of research and innovation is absolutely crucial to bring these technologies to the market. Now, research and innovation are key drivers for the competitiveness of overall the economy. They will lead the development of new technologies and new business models that will reduce the price of energy, that will be more efficient, but also create big market opportunities for the European industry. Now, turning to energy security, we need to diversify our fuel mix, which means that we need also to change our technology mix. So we need new technologies. And also we have to make our system more flexible and more versatile to be more resilient. So research and innovation will play a key role here as well, either by smart grids or new types of batteries or other forms of storage. So therefore, we need to develop in Europe a wide portfolio of energy solutions. And I'm very glad to see that the study that was launched today addresses many of them. Now, looking forward, I always like to also to look back and to see what we have learned either from success stories or some failures. But to be on the positive side, let me pick a success story. And I think that one of the greatest success stories of European research and innovation in energy is wind energy. So if I look back, we started back in the 80s with research and development. In the early 2000s, we set ambitious targets. And where we are today, we are the global leaders. It is the workhorse for our decarbonization of the power system. It currently produces 17.5% of the power generation that we need, provides 300,000 jobs, and creates huge opportunities for the European industry. What are my takeaway messages from this very positive experience? First of all, it is very important that we invest in horizon scanning to identify these emerging technologies of high potential and invest in them. Secondly, we need to develop the right research and innovation instruments in order to promote the research of these technologies. We need also to focus on research in pilots and first of the kind plants. I mean, Draghi also stressed that we are very good in developing ideas, developing R&D, but we have a very big difficulty to translate that to bring them to the markets. Of course, we need to create markets, also as Vincent said, and this can be through targets and through proper instruments to trigger additional investments. And we need to collaborate more. In view of very limited resources, we need to bring together all the research innovation stakeholders from the industry, the academia, the member states, and the SET plan for me is a very good example. All in all, and looking forward, I think that we need the research community to continuously search for new ways to be in the forefront of this global race for developing new technologies, because for me this is the only way that Europe will remain competitive.
Thank you very much, Vangelis, for your nice words and also this overarching strategic perspective on this issue. Now let's move our discussion to the next point, which is where should we then focus upon specifically when we talk of research innovation efforts for competitiveness in clean energy technologies. And Susan, in your study, you made a prioritization of actions for energy security based on specific pathways, as you presented before. But how are they relevant for competitiveness, these specific actions?
Yeah, thank you. So as you saw in the presentation, as well as developing those 30 actions, we also established 9 of these as the highest priority actions to increase European energy security. And actually many of these also speak to kind of this competitiveness perspective as well. So of the 9 top priority actions, looking back, 7 of these also quite directly address competitiveness. So first we can say we have these 3 actions that focus on supply chain location and complexity. So looking to simplify and onshore value chains into the EU. So there are the 2 actions I described in the presentation, but targeting the efficiency of manufacturing and recycling processes, looking at batteries and silicon-based PV. So both of these would have really strong alignment with addressing EU competitiveness. And the 3rd high priority action in this area was a call for solutions to increase the resilience of hydrogen value chains. Now, hydrogen technologies are still in an earlier stage of development compared to those other 2, but the proposed action would look to improve resilience of those value chains. And in this parallel, this could also then help to secure more European competitiveness across those. We also, you will have seen, had 4 high priority actions that focus specifically on critical raw material abundance and availability. All of these could consequently contribute to improving EU competitiveness by supporting better access to those raw materials or reducing dependence upon them. So these really focus on circular economy and recycling processes for smart energy technologies, geothermal energy, and for energy transmission and distribution. And then in addition, we have the action I described earlier, looking at mining. So overall, a lot of the actions we've developed would be relevant for both competitiveness and energy security, which makes sense because these goals are really closely aligned, two sides of the same coin, as Rosalind said at the beginning.
Thank you, Susan. Moving now to Adele, and from the perspective of energy research in Europe, what are your views on the proposed prioritization? I mean, are there any specific priorities that you think it's worth mentioning?
Yeah, thank you, Davide. So first of all, I would like to really congratulate the study, and I think I mean the methodology is very robust, and I think the prioritization makes a lot of sense. So generally, I would certainly abide very much to the result of this study. We, by the way, at ERA are, I think, covering 16 out of the 20 technologies which are covered as programs, dedicated programs, and probably 7 of the 9 critical research and innovation areas, which shows that there is really a strong convergence in our views. I would like to make a couple of additional points. The first one is the fact that this assessment, I think, is very interesting because it shows that we probably need to reconsider the approach which is spreading basically research and innovation efforts across the board and more concentrate in where either there are really significant criticalities in terms of security or where we can make a difference, build global leadership and thereby also build interdependencies for others where we're a little more at a risk. So I think this is very nice in a way, but the question is, this is a snapshot, and we know that the environment is moving extremely rapidly, both in terms of technological development, meaning that you know the KPIs that we are seeing today will probably not be at all the same as what they will be in 2 years or 3 years from now. We know that technological advancement is not a continuum, it's not totally foreseeable. We have surprises, and we need to be able to take that into consideration. The second element is very important, is the geopolitical element. Let's enjoy economical environment. Let's not forget that the Inflation Reduction Act is only just 2 years old, and this was a major change in, let's say, the competitive landscape and the relationship between EU and the United States in terms of trade. If you look at China, same. I think China is increasingly seen as a systemic rival and a really very strong competitor, threatening even the industrial security in Europe only over the last years. So we can imagine that this situation will still continue to evolve, and in that respect, I think that this assessment should not be one snapshot done every once in a while, and I would very much welcome the idea of having a body, some kind of energy strategy agency, which will be independent, of course, but looking and permanently monitoring and making this risk assessment and advising on how the risks are moving and what are the best approaches to research and innovations. That's one. Now, if I look at how the priorities were built, there are a number, and that's totally natural, of very strong assumptions. First of all, there are 3 energy scenarios, and there is a lot of choices which are made on multi-criteria assessment, which of course always raises the question of how do we weight the different criteria. And so I think that in the future we should think about having a broader, let's say, consensus on how we assign the weights on these different criteria. One thing I feel a little bit is maybe that the geo-economical element is probably not enough taken into consideration because it is absolutely essential at this time. And in this perspective, I would imagine that in a future run of this exercise, we should build sustainable competitive sustainability as being really at the center of defining the criteria which will lead to this prioritization. And then last but not least, also, of course, we speak about critical raw materials and acceptance issues. I think that research and innovation should not be bound only to technology research. There is a lot of very critical aspects on the transition and on the competitiveness, which are more related to social science and humanities. And I think we should expand the scope of the research to these aspects as well. And this goes a little bit hand in hand with what Vangelis said and Vincent on the regulatory policy sandboxes. Last but not least, I think that we need to reflect, knowing that we have limited money always. We need to reflect on how we can improve the efficiency on how this money is put at use in research innovation. I know this was not the mandate of the study, but I think we need to reflect on a number of aspects. The first one being the fragmentation. I think we need really to think about how we can make research programming in a more predictable way. At the moment, there is too much fragmentation, too much uncertainty, and this, in my view, hampers really the efficiency and the continuity of the research. There is certainly a lot to be improved in terms of the alignment, and we've discussed about the set plan between EU-funded research, and let's recall that this only represents 10% of the public funding altogether. 90% comes from the member states and associated countries. So alignment is absolutely essential, and we need really to work on that one. The last one, I think, is of course the lab to fab, so accelerating the time from research to market. And in that perspective, it calls really also to the reorganizing the Death Valley and to get industry much closer, well, industry and research innovation much closer one to another. Also calling for regulatory sandboxes, as we mentioned earlier, to accelerate this path. This is absolutely essential. And looking at these three elements, which are absolutely key, we believe that setting a kind of center of excellence for these critical European centers of excellence, where you can make much closer interaction between the different stakeholders, would be highly beneficial to reduce this time from transfer of technology from research to industry and to market.
Thank you, Adele, very much also for your ideas on the future and how we can practically address some of the issues. Vincent, maybe now talking of probably the more near future, and we have heard that the president is calling for a clean industrial deal as one of the very first acts of the European Commission. So how do you think research and innovation could contribute to this new deal?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say much about the clean industrial deal yet because it's under preparation as work in progress, and we will only know early next year what the clean industrial deal is exactly. But what is very clear already is that energy and affordable energy will be at the core of the clean industrial deal. And that's what our new commissioner designate has been asked to work on, an affordable energy action plan. And in industry, that's a very important factor. I mean, if you take energy-intensive industries, for instance, we know that energy can represent about 30% of the production cost. I mean, that's a massive expenditure, so we need to find all ways to reduce those costs. The renewable energy technology is already very cost competitive. I mean, and they are available, but we need further research and innovation to decrease those costs and increase the performance of renewable technologies. In the field of industry, I mean, heat is a very important load. This is 2/3 of the energy consumption in industry, so we need to look at ways to decarbonize industrial heat at all temperatures, and including the high temperatures, which is not obvious. So there's a need for further research in this area. Need for further research also on hydrogen, which is a way to decarbonize hard-to-abate industries. That's the supply side. At the same time, we should also focus our efforts on energy efficiency. I mean, we all know that the cheapest energy is the one that we're not consuming. So research and innovation in energy efficiency technologies is important. We've done that in Horizon Europe in the past. I mean, that of course is key to make industry more competitive. I was, by the way, quite interested by one of the findings of the study that one of the priority actions should be on increasing the energy efficiency of supply chains, for instance, for batteries. I think that I would fully agree. I mean, that is a very important area of intervention. You know that we have the energy efficiency first principle now, which is enshrined into the Energy Efficiency Directive. That's definitely something we should promote. And at the same time, we should look at industry not just as an isolated energy user, but also industry as part of a wider energy system. And what can we do to integrate industry in that system in a better way? How can we offer flexibility to industry so that they can benefit from better prices of energy? And for that, we need smart grids, we need digitization. So we need to make sure that industries participate in the energy system and can adapt their loads according to the prices and therefore reduce their energy bills. That's what we're trying to do with projects on research and innovation in smart grids. And linked to that, of course, research and innovation in advanced storage system. I mean, and not just lithium-ion batteries, but all kind of system that industry could be using to increase their competitiveness, but also to increase energy security at large. And finally, we know that with all these technologies, I mean, there will always remain some greenhouse gas emissions, which will not be removed entirely. So we also need to pursue research and innovation in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And this will be, of course, instrumental to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So there's a wide scope of technologies and actions that need to be undertaken. And that's what we're doing now in the research and innovation programs.
Yeah. Thank you, Vincent. Now turning to Vangelis, along these lines, one of the many files you're in charge of in your unit is also the Clean Energy Transition Observatory, which is providing a robust stock-taking of where we are with the different technologies and in their development in particular. So based on this track of work, if you could share with us your insights on how research and innovation can improve global competitiveness of the EU clean energy sector.
Thank you, David. The Clean Energy Technology Observatory is a joint initiative of many Commission services, and the JRC produces every year at least 15 to 17 deep dives to individual technologies, assessing the current state and the prospects of research through a number of indicators like investments, patents, technology readiness level, trade data, and so on. The next wave of reports will be released at the beginning of next month. But I can already share some key highlights that are coming from these reports. It is very clear that Europe has a very, very strong reputation when it comes to the quality of research and the quality of the technology that we develop. We're also very good in attracting investments, although of course there's always scope to attract more, but we're also very strong in high value patents. And I would like to give an example. For example, for the energy intensive industry that Vincent just mentioned, we are the global leaders. We produce 12% more patents than the Americans that are coming second, and then we have the Japanese, the Chinese, and the rest of the world. Also, we are very good in coordinating research, and the SET plan is again an excellent example that demonstrates how, by joining forces, governments, academia, and the industry can come up with joint plans in order to advance with all these technologies. And of course, we have excellent engineering firms that they can put the most complicated engineering and energy projects around the world. However, there are also some issues that the colleagues have identified. Our energy manufacturing industry is affected by the high energy costs. Secondly, we are very slow to scale up from research to overall deployment. And also, private investments are rather sluggish. So we need to accelerate this to bridge this innovation gap. So therefore, we will be able to trigger even more investments. Then we also depend on for raw materials and components from countries that are outside the European Union. And this, to some extent, limits or constrains our capacities to develop further, and also has an effect on our strategic autonomy. And of course, we have a gap in skills and also shortage of labor. So and I'm glad to see that many of these elements have already been identified by the study that has been presented today, that demonstrates that there is a kind of a consensus where are our strengths and where are the weaknesses and where exactly we need to follow in Europe, to focus in Europe. Now, some ideas about where R&I can help the competitiveness, and I would like to bring forward, for example, 4 ideas. We need to develop new technologies. Vincent already mentioned some. We needed to focus, for example, on direct air capture, on electrification of other transport modes beyond road, also about decarbonization of the energy-intensive industry. Secondly, we needed to invest in better products that have a lower operating cost, so therefore we can reduce the overall cost of energy, but also create opportunities for high-quality products to be exported to the rest of the world. We needed to work on substitutes of the critical raw materials and also on materials that can be very easily recycled. And finally, and linked to this, we need also to invest in circularity by design, because this way we can produce products that not only are competitive, but also are in line with very high environmental standards, and also they are also taken over by the society as a whole, who are looking for more and more environmentally safe products. So overall, I believe that the study and the results of SETO are very much in line, which for me is a boost of confidence for all the work that we have done, and all this work, of course, will help when we prepare now the Commission for the next 5-year program to identify which are the new priorities on how we can boost the European research and innovation in the global scale.
Thank you, Vangelis, as well, for this nice perspective. Now, let's move for a moment to Slido and check whether our public has any question for us, and I see already some. We could maybe have a short exchange. First one, can we better group technologies for common needs on energy security and competitiveness in policy making? Maybe Adel, if you want to take a first go.
Okay, thank you. I'll be very short. I think, of course, the idea is very nice and very attractive, because one of the things we see also with energy transition is that the energy system is much more complex, and we're talking about a much broader range of technologies, which, by the way, each has different value chains. So it's quite attractive to have maybe a more integrated view where we can make a difference. I think, unfortunately, that, we should always attempt to do that, but in many cases, the devil lies in the details, and it's very difficult to apply general principles, even to a single technology, because you could immediately spot that depending on what part of the value chain or in which area or where it is deployed or in different elements of context, you need to probably have a different approach. So yes, this is something we need to try to do as much as possible, but I think the progress we can do there is quite limited.
Thank you. Maybe let's move quick to another question. How do we square the need for competitiveness with the UN's ambition for global economic justice and energy security for all? Maybe Vincent, you would like to take this one? I'm passing you the ball, dropping you rather than passing.
Very much. I mean, one does not exclude the other. I mean, if we are competitive on net zero technologies and we act together with other regions in the world, I mean, that's also a way to help the emerging economies in decarbonizing, giving that, also offering them cheaper net zero technologies. I think what was said by Adele on the Inflation Reduction Act and the efforts from China as well to boost their manufacturing capacity in net zero technologies. I mean, these are positive news. I mean, that a lot of regions in the world are stepping up their efforts to increase their manufacturing capacity. We have to do it in a way that, of course, is in line with the rules of the World Trade Organizations, and we have to also to see how these net zero technologies can be used by all over the world to meet the Sustainable Development Goal in a way that is fair and just, and that is being pursued in different organizations, not just in the UN, also in other international organizations and international fora as well. I mean, Rosalind was mentioning mission innovation. I could mention as well the Clean Energy Ministerial, which is also addressing the energy transition in emerging economies, and we have many of them around the table, and that all these countries need to be together discussing not only the research, the innovation, but also the deployment of net zero technologies.
Thank you very much, Vincent. Maybe a last question for Vangelis before we move on, also being reminding of the time. What is your position on decoupling? And here I will take decoupling material use from energy generation. How would you define the type of growth you're looking for?
I think that here we need to define what a decoupling means. We can talk about the decoupling of emissions with growth or materials used for growth. Let me try to answer in a kind of a generic way that covers both of them, because for me the solution is simple. With R&I, we can create products of a higher value, so therefore this can support our growth, at the same time minimizing emissions or minimizing material use. And let me just give an example. Let me go to the materials. If we can go to circularity by design, that means that we can, first of all, by creating high performance materials in high performance applications, the volume of materials that is needed is reduced. Second, by focusing on recycling and circularity, this material is not lost. Simply we'll find either second life or we will find another application. So therefore, we are still within the planetary boundary conditions of the resource that we have. So circularity for me here is the key, and that is why I think that everybody now is calling that when we take into account the development of new technologies, even now for tenders, circularity is an issue. So we need to make use of the material that we have and ensure that they will be used in the future. Let me go then also to decoupling growth with emissions. And again, all the efforts that we do here for decarbonization is to reduce the emissions while keep growing. Energy intensive industry. We try to find ways on how we can reduce the emissions from the industry. We can talk about electrification, we can talk about CCS, which is an indirect way that we reduce the emissions by capturing and then storing them permanently. And there are so many other ways. For example, in the steel industry, we're talking about the direct reduction of iron. There are so many technologies, and R&I can help us to produce high quality and high value products, maintain our products while our emissions are reducing. And we have seen that so far in the last years we see this decoupling. So R&I will help us ensure that this decoupling will continue.
Yes. And I would add, if you allow me, that on growth, this is all the reasoning you did is valid, not only in terms of economic growth, but also in terms of economic security and security for our families, hence addressing also issues of energy poverty. So I think it's really a multiple win situation we're trying to address through research and innovation. Thank you very much for this exchange, and thank you to the public for putting forward these very good questions. I would like now to launch a word cloud poll in Slido, and I would like to ask our public to please reply to this question. So which specific key challenges are in your view important to be addressed by research and innovation for energy security and competitiveness? Now, while we leave some time for our public to reply to the questions, to the poll, we can maybe move on and occupy this space and time with another discussion. So I would like maybe now to move to another topic, which is the clean energy research innovation funding and the synergies between energy security and competitiveness. An element that already popped up in our exchanges. And so maybe first and foremost, I would like to ask to Adèle and also to Vincent, if they could share their views on how can we maximize the impact of EU funding for research and innovation in clean energy. Vincent, you won the lottery.
I can start. No, Rosalind was mentioning earlier that within Horizon Europe, we are earmarking 7 billion euro for research and innovation in clean energy from 21 to 27. We also have the Innovation Fund that supports large-scale demonstration projects, which allocate a substantial amount of money for research in clean energy as well. We have the cohesion policy support that is massive, and other programs like the LIFE program, for instance, which facilitate the market uptake of innovative solutions. So all these programs coexist. What is very important, in my opinion, is first of all that when we design the priorities in all these programs, we have to make sure that we create synergies, we avoid overlap, and all these programs are complementing each other's. And for that, we've got what you call in the GRTD the co-creation process. So we sit all together, all the services who are managing these programs, and we design the priorities in such a way that we can maximize the impact of those programs together, and that we have complementary priorities. So that's one first thing that we are doing, which is really useful. A second one, of course, is that it's quite complex, the financing landscape for researchers, innovators, especially if they are SMEs. I mean, so we have to help them navigate through the maze of these different financing opportunities that they have in front of them. And that requires some efforts, and the Commission should not do that alone. I mean, that should be done together with the national contact point, having one entry point where the innovators can get all the information they need and be directed towards the funding source that is the most suitable for their projects at the technology readiness level that it is at the moment. And then once they're successful, we need to make sure that they can accomplish their project in the most simple way without creating too much administrative burden. And there I would like to make reference to what has been done in Horizon Europe to simplify the participation of different organizations in terms of submissions of project proposals, but also during the implementation of their projects to receive funding in a fast manner, using lump sum when necessary. I mean, that of course is very important, again, in particular for SMEs. And then, of course, I mean, comes the issue that Adele and Vangelis mentioned, which is very important. I mean, let's not stop the support once the innovators have developed their prototypes, and we should accompany them until the market. And that's a massive issue that we are tackling, but where I suppose, I mean, we could do better, because I think Vangelis was very right to say that we are sort of leaders in terms of patents, in terms of publications in clean energy, but we're lagging behind in terms of converting our innovations into marketable solutions and in scaling them up. I think, and there, I think everybody would agree that there's a need to do more to attract private finance using tools like InvestEU, which de-risk investment and enable the innovators to get access to loans, to equity as well in the European Innovation Council. So all these tools have to really be further promoted so that we're really bridging that gap. And finally, the set plan was mentioned. I haven't mentioned it yet, so I should. I think because it's also a fantastic tool to coordinate the efforts at European and national level, having the authorities. And now that the set plan is enshrined into the Net Zero Industry Act, I think that would give it even more impact, and we will have a better coordination of all these research and innovation efforts. Adele was saying we're not investing enough in terms of public funding in research and innovation. That's very true. So let's try to increase that level, but also to make sure that we make best use of that public money by better coordination between the different member states and the European Union.
And the industry too.
And industry too, because the industry is sitting around the table in the energy technology and innovation platform, of course, that are part of the set plan.
Thank you. Adele, any comment on your side here?
Well, thank you very much, Vincent. I think I think it was perfectly comprehensive. So I have basically nothing to add. Maybe a few elements to highlight a little bit. So, but I already mentioned, I think, the fragmentation of the landscape, making more legible, a little bit more consistent, and we know how difficult it is given the complexity of the issue that we're tackling. Certainly, this alignment question, and this is about the continuity, as we said, the continuity of the research. We see that there is a lot of stop and go, and this is very frustrating, and certainly decreasing the efficiency and the output of the whole research innovation function. The alignment essential, and yeah, we mentioned the set plan. I think this is, of course, the key and a fabulous instrument to foster this alignment. But this needs to go much further than what we've achieved so far. And this is probably because, as we said, Europe funding is just a small part of the total. So it's extremely important that we succeed in aligning and having synergies and avoid duplication between the efforts. And we see still, I mean, as we are a pan-European organization, we see a lot of duplication of efforts. And this is part of our brief to try to defragment and to avoid this, but this is still happening. So set plan is really a central tool that we need to push forward for creating this alignment. Then the lab to fab, which I mentioned also, I think this is absolutely crucial. And I think this is also, I mean, there are many elements there, of course. It's part of the way the ecosystem has been built in Europe, and this is part of the culture also that we need to think about. But there are things we can change there. Definitely, this is about getting all the stakeholders closer together. It's also, I think, partly we know, and this is very apparent in the Draghi report, the problem that there is a very limited activity of venture capital here in Europe. And this is really a very much goes back to a question of culture. I mean, it's a risk culture that doesn't exist or exists at a much lower level here than elsewhere. And in order to tackle this problem, I think the role of public funding should also to be very much de-risking as much as possible the pilot and the IP, so that it can be taken up by industry, by venture capital, by risk capital, up to the scale up and the market uptake and the scale up. So this is very important in my view. Yeah, I think well, this would be my 3 points on maximizing the impact of research innovation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe, sorry. And the last one, of course, which is the core of this discussion, is the fact that, yes, we need to have more focus. And so there was a question about, I mean, are we forgetting about the principle of technology neutrality? I think it's not about forgetting it. It's probably applying it with a little bit more of nuance in the fact that I think we need to keep the door open, because we know and history has shown us that sometimes, you know, a technology which suddenly pops up. And I remember very well being in the PV sector 15 years ago, people were laughing at us saying, but PV is 10 times more expensive than the other technology. It will never contribute. And we see that now it's one of the two major pillar of the transition. So we need to keep that open, and we need to remain somehow technology neutral, but we need to recognize what are the winners and where we have strengths on which we can build on and have a focused approach on this. Last but not least, I think there's a real question of rebalancing the funding across the value chain. I think we have lately had a lot of focus on the higher TRL. I think it's very important also to, first of all, not to forget the breakthrough innovation, that's for sure, but also to think about technology development, the mid-TRL, because this is what is feeding the funnel, which is really the driver of getting our industry competitive in a sustainable way in the mid and the long term. And then I finish there.
Thank you, Adel. Maybe one last round for Susan and Vangelis before we go back to the poll, and then we conclude our discussion today. Susan and Vangelis, how do you see some specific R&I elements on energy security that go beyond competitiveness and that we need to consider here, maybe beyond what was already tabled by the colleagues? I will pass the floor to Susan first from home.
Thank you. Yeah, so as you've seen already from the discussion, we think there's pretty good alignment between competitiveness and energy security. But having said that, there were some aspects that were more relevant to energy security that we identified in the study, which are perhaps less strongly linked to the sort of the competitiveness agenda, if you like. So One of the examples of this is digital vulnerability. So we identified several actions that would focus on cybersecurity risks associated with clean energy technologies. So, for example, one of our high priority actions focuses on addressing cybersecurity risks for smart grids, building and district heating technologies. We also have many actions that take into account wider environmental issues, which is something we touched on already a little in the discussion. So that's kind of both sides of the coin. So both how technologies respond to climate change. So things like, looking at how does the performance of hydropower technology work? Can that be maintained in a changing climate? But then on the other side, thinking about what the environmental impacts might be for some of these technologies and how those could be mitigated. And I already mentioned one of these. We have some actions looking at public attitudes and opinions. Of course, this is going to be crucial to practical implementation of some of these technologies in the EU, but maybe is less focused on international competitiveness. So I think, although not all of these actions speak directly to competitiveness, they have some angle in that as well. But also it's really important to take this wider perspective. Just having a purely technological or competitive focused agenda is going to lead to gaps in delivering a sort of secure energy system that we need to see as we have this green transition. So I think as others have already said, it's really important to have this wider view, this not technology only approach, and we need to think about the role that social sciences and humanities also play in this transition and in the R&I agenda we need here.
Thank you, Susan. Vangelis, I'll leave you the
last
word.
Well, I totally agree with Susan, and I would like to complement what she said with another example. And I would like to stress that the energy transition is a materials transition. While we strive to delink our economy with imports from fossil fuels, at the same time we import increasing volumes of raw materials and components that we need for the transition. And I would like to give an example in wind energy, offshore wind turbines, which is one of the best examples of what the European R&D has produced. One of the main components are materials that are rare earth elements, like dysprosium and neodymium. And there is now a lot of effort to substitute these materials. So this is advanced materials are very high in the research agenda, but also in the geopolitical one. So how can research in advanced materials can help the overall security of the energy system? And I would like to throw here 3 ideas. Idea number 1 is that, of course, to continue researching on materials that can act as substitutes. And again, on the example that I brought up about the permanent magnets in the wind turbines, we're going to release very soon a report on advanced materials and the role they're going to play in the energy system, where we can highlight that we can substitute neodymium with materials that are easier to find and are lower cost, like cerium, and this will not affect the overall performance of the wind turbine. Secondly, by introducing advanced materials, we can expand the life of the energy infrastructure and make it more secure. For example, we can use advanced materials for the blades of wind turbines, so the blades can be more resistant to fatigue and corrosion, and that means they're going to last longer and without or with very little downtimes, which also helps in the overall reliability of the energy system. And last, advanced materials are behind the new technologies, the new solutions that will stabilize the grid and ensure the energy system. And I'm talking about new superconductors, we're talking about supercapacitors, and the new storage. So to conclude, we in the European Commission, we are very much now looking into how research and innovation can help the overall energy system. Earlier this year, the Commission made a communication, and this is only the start. And from this point on, we will see a lot of action and initiatives from the European Commission to enhance research in advanced materials that will have a huge benefits in the overall security of our energy system.
Yes. Maybe we can take a look at the results of our poll on Slido. Defragmentation, I think. It really passed the message. But indeed, I mean, I can see themes that were actually very much debated today on cybersecurity, high energy costs, policy priority changes, scarcity, I guess, of materials and substitution of materials. There's the issue also of international competition, so with rare earths from China. But then indeed, I think also one point there at the top that there is no silver bullet strategy, so that this really requires acting on different fronts, not only on research and innovation in a way, but also then, if you want to, down the supply chain, so then from a policy perspective, of course, so then acting not only on investments, but also on framework conditions that make sure that everything is there to allow innovation to not only prosper, but then really to become a reality on our markets. With this, I would like to thank our panelists, and I would like to conclude our discussion today, where we learned a lot on the specific and important function that research innovation can have, both for energy security and competitiveness. And we are understood today that many of these challenges are really shared. So in a way, security and competitiveness are actually two sides of the same coin. Research innovation can be a tool to deliver a win-win option for both of them. Now, there are many actions, as we've seen today, that needs to be taken, and this is actually a responsibility of many actors, not only at EU level, but also national level, in the industry and in the research and innovation world. So synergies are important, so not only at policy level, but then also a bit more at community level. And in the race to the net zero, the fragmenting the EU research innovation landscape, increasing synergies between the European level, national level, and also public and private level are key really to boost research innovation contribution to EU competitiveness. And I guess the strategic energy technology plan can really play an active role to make sure that these levels get together to define the priorities for the coming years. So again, in a context where self-sufficiency and full autonomy are just elusive, maybe a more focused approach to foster global leadership on key technologies and risk dependencies might be worth to be explored further. This is maybe good food for thought for all of us. And with this, I would like to thank also the public for putting forward good questions and good elements that will also help us in our reflection. And again, I conclude again thanking them, thanking you, and for this profound and insightful discussion on this matter. Thank you very much indeed.